We have the next, panel discussion. I would like to invite Dr. Vishal Rao. Dr. Vishal Rao is a professor and the chief of a department and of head, neck oncology and robotic surgery at HCG Cancer Center. He's been an innovator, a TEDx speaker, public health advocate, and a member of Hugh Power Committee on Tobacco and then Cancer Control with Government of Karnataka. He is a Judy Wilkenfield Award recipient for Global Tobacco Control and inventor of OM voice prosthesis, which is a $1 speaking device for throat cancer patients. So, Dr. Vishal, would like to welcome you into and then leading the panel discussion. Okay.
So I'm going to be conducting this panel discussion on dogs versus geeks. And we have a very interesting panel here. Before we set the panel rolling, I'm just going to give you a very quick, can you connect the slides please? Okay. So before we start off this panel, I'll just give you a very quick introductory note on this particular panel. How many of you all have known this figure? Have you heard about this guy? He's called Lao Tzu. How many of you all just quickly gave a raise of hands, and how many of you have heard about Lao Tzu? So this is a very interesting story about Lao Tzu that I want to introduce you to this panel. So Lao Tzu was once traveling with two of his disciples in a forest when he actually comes across a river. And Lao Tzu sits down, meditates for a second, gets up and walks across water. A couple of minutes later, seeing this, the senior disciple again sits down, meditates, gets up, walks across water. Seeing these two, the junior most disciple is excited. He says, this is the time for fame, sits down, meditates a little more longer, gets up, walks, steps, puts his first foot into water and falls, drowns. Lao Tzu looks at his other disciple, smiles and says, you need to tell him where the stones are. Meditation, he said, was a tool, not magic. And I think technology is same way the tool, not magic. And today we have 4 excellent experts from various different fields coming to tell us where the stones are. And they're going to tell us much more interesting things about healthcare, and I'm going to invite all of them. We have Dr. Shyam Vasudeva. I've given their LinkedIn profile, so each one of you can separately connect with them. He's himself a veteran in the industry. He's been a founder of several startups. He's been a guide, a mentor, and a good friend. I will request you to come over, sir. I would request Milind Shah. He's right there in the last row. He's currently with Unitus Ventures, and as a partner, he's guiding several MNCs and helps in bringing investments. I'm upon Ajit Narayanan. Ajit is again a startup founder. He brings in a very interesting startup perspective into our discussion. He's a founder, CTO of MFine. And lastly, Soaib Grewal, who is a venture partner with T Labs, venture investment arm of Times India. So with this entire thing, I'm just going to set some timelines. We're going to have some few minutes of introduction. We have a round 1 and a round 2, which I'm going to break into 2 different themes. And lastly, we will have a separate session for audience. So just to give you the first round, what we wanted to discuss in this aspect is revolutionary to evolutionary, and changing the whole perspective in the spurt in medical innovations. And I'm going to get the panelists to speak to you on this particular aspect. But before that, I just want all of you to have a look at this. In the 19th century, René Laennec actually discovered the stethoscope. He actually invented the stethoscope. And look at what happened in the 20th century when Littman actually, who's a Harvard professor, innovated it. Just look at the time trends from the 19th century to the 20th century. And what's most interesting about this part is David Littman started collaborating. He actually collaborated with Gus Maslow to actually expand cardiosonics to take up Littman to the world. So there was an era that changed from 19th to 20th century. Now what I want our panelists to allude upon with their personal experiences is, what's the mantra for the 21st century? Because all of us here want to understand what is the next 10 years going to be like in this space of healthcare, in this absolutely evolving atmosphere where Mudit, John spoke about how everything is going to change in the next coming years with governments interfacing, and where we are defined by version gaps, where we are defined by if you have an iPhone XS versus if you have an iPhone 8, you feel like a generation gap. Here it's going to be a version gap that is actually going to define a generation gap. So how is it going to be like for teams, talents, technologies? And I think we can start with you, Soaib, and we can get the ball rolling.
So, would you like us to all give an intro as well, or?
You can.
Okay,
You have
perfect.
3 minutes. You can just you can use
Great,
your time.
perfect. So, quick intro on myself. I am a venture partner at Times Internet, or the venture investment arm of Times Internet. We are one of India's largest consumer internet conglomerates and have been investing in companies actively for the last 6 or 7 years. We essentially invest at the intersection of consumer technology and internet spaces. And everywhere from, say, pre-seed till about Series B. Healthcare has been personally a focus of mine or an interest of mine since my first startup, which was about 9 years ago, where we were working in clean water, so sort of on the periphery of healthcare. In fact, my first 2 co-founders were also doctors. But at Times Internet, we've been looking at healthcare closely for, I'd say, about a year now as well. And I think there are a couple of things that have changed. So I can't claim to say that I know what will happen in the next 10 years, but I can tell you what has happened or what is happening right now, which makes healthcare an interesting place for us and investors to look at, especially as consumer technology investors. I think access and the ability to get to consumers cost effectively, both from an acquisition point of view, but then also from a delivery point of view, has reduced tremendously because of cheaper data and mobility solutions. I remember back when I started my company about 9 years back, my first startup, to acquire customers, and we were targeting primarily BPL customers, below poverty line, in urban communities. We used to actually have to use offline infrastructure, literally partnering with ASHA workers, Mohalla clinics, and things like that to get customers. That's changed rapidly, right? I think getting to people who lack access, and that ability has changed quite a bit. I think that another thing which will take place over the next few years is real sort of heavy personalization. And I think as we collect more and more data from users, I think personalization both on the care and delivery side, but then also as that sort of expands to things like insurance. I think a lot of that is going to impact treatment and quality of care that you can sort of provide for patients. I think these are 2 areas that I find most exciting, and I think I can.
I would want to ask you, from what I spoke about earlier, how are we looking at? I mean, from an investor's perspective, how are we going to look at? Do you look at a team? And if you look at a team, how is it that you want the dynamics of this team? I want you to get a little deeper into this and tell me, if you are an investor and if you want to look at a startup or you want to look at a company and say, yes, this is a company that I would want to bet my money on, naturally, because they all start from zero. So what is it that in the team dynamics that you look at in terms of engagement of the configuration of the teams?
Sure. Personally, at least what I've noticed from some of the most exciting companies I've seen over the last year or 2 years in the health tech space, it's a very multidisciplinary team, and it's interdisciplinary. It sounds like a bit of cliche, but I find that teams that have doctors as founders, not necessarily CEOs, they don't necessarily have to be the CEO, but doctors as co-founders, along with folks from tech backgrounds, are actually doing some of the most innovative work, because I think that there's a certain context that a doctor brings in and brings to the table from a medical practice point of view that an engineer would otherwise have to go out and seek that information. And there's a certain, I'd say, sort of naive optimism that folks from the tech sector bring to the industry as well, which allows, I'd say, this wonderful balance to exist between what is actually possible on the ground and sort of really thinking about the future and what should happen. So I think teams like this, for me, have been the most interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ajit, your views on this?
Sure. So a quick introduction. So name is Ajit. I'm the founding team and the CTO of a company called MFine. We are a healthcare startup based out of Bangalore. We focus on primary and secondary healthcare delivery, right? And I think a lot of the problems that the last panel talked about is exactly what we are out to solve. We know the drastic numbers and the problems in Indian healthcare. So we look at reach, access, and quality as 3 primary facets that healthcare really needs addressing, right? More so in India, but largely worldwide as well, this is the same problem. And we believe we could fundamentally change that by thinking technology first, not technology as the only solution and the end of it, but as a means to address this problem. And we do that by two techniques. One, we use mobile and internet as a means to get reach across to every nook and corner of the country, because we believe there is no other physical infrastructure that can meet the demands that is required in India. Two, we use AI primarily as a force to replicate quality. If you have quality healthcare and protocols, etc., defined, you could then use that to replicate that quality across a lot of people.
Can you tell us a little bit about how did you build this team? When you came up with this entire idea, how did you build this team?
We started with imagining, right? I mean, four of us. So we are 5 people in the founding team. 4 of us come from the technology/e-commerce/fashion background. We are from Mintra, and we have 1 doctor.
Okay.
He's the sort of the go-to guy to define what the problems are and how we should be addressing it and so on, right? So that's the mixed bag of teams. Why we have technology in the front is also that because we believe thinking technology first lets you to lead and define products differently and arrive at different solutions. So that was the way we sort of set up the teams. And something about the revolutionary thing that you sort of talked about. There are some fundamental driving factors that lead us to that. The time between what is in research and what becomes mainstream is dramatically reducing every year, right? I mean, something that was in research by the time it got in mainstream was 10 years, a few decades back. Now somebody is talking about a advanced algorithm about, in computer vision. The very next day, somebody's built a library for it, and the third day you could use it, right? That shortening of that research to mainstream lets you to really think of technology for solutions. And that's where I think we end up with very fundamentally different solutions. Some of the discussions I've been observing in the last one, like for instance, EMR, is it a problem? Why is it a problem that doctors don't adopt? In our mind, EMR is not a thing that doctors must solve. It's the wrong way to approach the problem. EMR and data provisioning, data creation is everybody's equal rights as much as it is doctors, right? So the moment you take away that problem from the doctor and distribute it, you end up with a completely different revolutionary product.
So Ajit, I'm going to ask you something more. I'm going to ask you, now that you have a doctor in the team, how much do you feel the need for a daily engagement with this doctor? And I'm asking this because if you look at the time trend that I showed earlier, there was a time when a doctor was contacted by the geek only once, and then the business of the entire device or a product would continue, where the doctor would sporadically be required, to an active engagement in the 20th century where Littman said that there was a need to partner and actually work with him hand to hand. To today, you're saying that you virtually have one person who's founding and who's running with you day to day, closing the gap. So can you tell us a little bit more on the importance of this and what do you see as a value add for this, or do you feel there are other ways?
Sure. I'll shock you a little bit more. One person in the founding team, but we have 20 doctors in our company.
Wonderful.
So 20 doctors and around 28 engineers. So fundamentally, we believe that we are engineering medicine, right? This is what we are doing. And it is impossible to do this without the domain expertise and the doctors being the people who define how the product must be, what should be it, right? It's very easy for us to claim that, coming from a technology background, it's easy to imagine it. Everything seems like a mathematical equation to you, but in reality, it is not. So we work extremely, extremely closely to the fact that a lot of us on technology now can talk deep about medicine, a lot about how diagnosis is done, protocols, and so on.
How has the doctor side perceived this?
Oh,
is it a welcome move, or
absolutely,
has it been hesitation?
Absolutely, because the way we built the product, like I said, if you pivot the product and look at the product very differently, you end up with a different solution.
Sure.
So doctors see when they start seeing the benefit of what a system like MFine can do, which basically collects all of the EMR without the doctor having to punch in anything.
Does that help you market your product better?
Absolutely.
Sure. Sorry. Extremely sorry for that.
So yes, it absolutely helps. So the moment you put a extremely good product in the hands of the doctor, them adopting it is is a no-brainer after that, right? They're going to use it. The problem is always in the product solve. The yesteryears of thinking of product solves was, defined with a certain amount of technology and capabilities that we had. If you reimagine that, you end up with a different product that you give it to the hands of the doctor. They are absolutely going to love it. So they love it. Doctors, so much so, today have virtual assistants helping them, right? So our bots support these doctors on a day-to-day basis. Today, God forbid, if there is a problem and the bot goes to sleep, I mean, in the sense that there is something that's wrong and the bot doesn't wake up, all hell breaks loose, right? Doctors are coming and saying, where is my assistant? Why is he not picked up on this case, right? And that's a welcome change to see. They do not see this as a barrier. They see this as massively multiplicating their ability to serve more. They see that. And when they participate in the whole invention process and the product definition process, it just becomes really a product that doctors love. And that's the way we saw it. We cannot build a healthcare tech product in isolation if you don't have the people who use it and who needs to be benefited by it in the core of the team. And that's why we have this spread.
Thank you. So, your inputs on this. You've been a partner at Unitas. You've been looking at several of these initiatives who approach you with ideas. How do you evaluate these core teams, and what is it that you look at?
Yeah. Thanks, Vishal. Just a quick introduction. So I work with Unitas Ventures. It's an early stage impact fund. So we fund at the seed stage. And in addition to the ROI criteria, we also look at social impact. My prior life was in Medtronic, which is medical devices, kind of a global organization, one of the pioneers and leaders. And it was founded on the principle of collaboration between engineers and physicians. And pacemaker, one of the first products that we invented, came in from such a collaboration. So I completely agree with Ajit and with Soaib in terms of the need of physicians in the founding team. To add on to all the points that they made, I would just say that it's very, very important to have the right problem definition. What is it that the startup is trying to do? What is the exact problem that they are trying to solve? And as you get into more and more details, you will be able to come out with a better solution, and that is the role of the physician on the team. To your second point, is this a one-time interaction or is this a regular interaction? As the product evolves, it's very important for the physician to provide feedback. Many medical devices, and Medtronic has been extremely successful at that, it's just not a one-time innovation, one-time product development. There's a continuous and incremental innovation that happens, and that comes in because the physician gives you feedback about how the product is and where are the shortcomings. I would just add one more element or one more leg to your stool. You are talking about two legs, physicians and engineers, and I can't emphasize enough the importance of having a business person on the team. You have a great product. If you don't know how to take it to the market, if you don't have the right kind of business model which takes the product efficiently to hospital, doctors, and ultimately to the patient, you will not do well. I think Mudit spoke about this in the earlier discussion about, you want to have the right product, but you also want to, make a living.
Yep.
And unless you are able to make fair and reasonable profits by having the right business model, by taking the product efficiently, you're not going to succeed there. At Unitas, we definitely look at the founding team very, very closely. If the founding team is not multidisciplinary, as you said, it's a cliche, but yes, we do look at that. We look at whether there are doctors on the team or not, and if there aren't doctors on the team, at least do they have a strong advisor panel, which consists of doctors who are working with them very regularly. And one of our investee companies, Cyclops, Niranjan is sitting here. One of the things that brought us close to them was the fact that they do have a doctor on board. Not only do they have a doctor on their founding team, but they have a very strong advisory panel.
Another point that I would like to ask here is, you've added the third arm. Now, Mudit and John discussed a lot about an impediment that they hit, that is behavioral issues with doctors, which I think is what even Ajit was talking about. My question to you is, at this point, would you actually look at, when you're evaluating a proposal, because a lot of these could be disruptive solutions that would come out or change solutions for the next coming years, would you be wanting to look at behavioral experts who actually, either as doctors, engineers, or as business experts, tell you how is he going to induce this particular change if he believes in his idea?
Absolutely. So adoption is a critical issue. So we may not go to behavioral experts per se, but we do reach out to a network of doctors that we have. So for example, from my background, I know lots of specialists in different areas, and we would reach out to them to try and understand what would prevent adoption. I mean, take the famous example of EMR, we talked about that, and just trying to understand why would they not accept a solution, what could be some of the challenges, and then go back to the team, say how are you going to address that issue. So absolutely we will do it, but not necessarily through behavioral experts, but really reaching out to the customer segments.
But do you think that this is very important and crucial for the success of a team?
Obviously.
Yes. Sir, your inputs on this?
Yeah, quickly, I'm basically an engineer, and my work has been in 3 technical areas: computation, communication, and collaboration. If you ask the last 3-4 decades, that's what you see. That first, we had a lot of focus on computation from technology point of view, and then we made this huge, gigantic machines, the imaging machines like the Tesla, 2 Tesla, 3 Tesla, 9 Tesla machines, MRIs, and which had a lot of computing needs, and also the CT scanners, multi-slice CT scanners, And then we realized that, who is going to take care of this, and then communication comes into play. And you see there is a lot of communication-related technologies getting into medical field, and now it is the era of collaboration, I would say. And that is where collaboration is not just collaborative tools on the web. It's collaboration in all sense, where you have multidisciplinary people coming together and coming up with some concept, some technologies, and as what Ajit was saying, the cycle time has to reduce. So when this happens, there is no way we can think of, okay, we take the input now, we formulate the requirements, then we go for an ideation, and then we go for a design and development. That's the old-fashioned way of, a waterfall model or something like that, what we were using. Now it is, an agile technique, and the agile way, we have to continuously interact with the domain specialists and start doing this. So I started this experiment after my long stint in all these multinationals. And in 2010, started my own companies, one in healthcare and one in communications. And both these companies, we try to evolve that. And I see that in healthcare particularly, for a technologist, it's very, very important to understand the clinical aspect. And that is where it is what in my ventures, what I have done is that I have an evangelist. Until and unless I find an evangelist who is passionate enough and a pure clinical person who in that domain, like in ophthalmology, when I made my company called Forest Health, I got a lot of interaction and advice from no other than Dr. Venkataswamy, who is the legend, in ophthalmology, who started the Arvind Eye Hospital. I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of weekends with him. Several weekends I have spent with him and understand, not just the technical aspect of this, the business aspect of this. Because, there is a lot of 10% of the population who needs care have been addressed till now. And we are only taking care of sick care, not the real health care part of it. There is 90% which is just open. And how do we fill that gap? What are the gaps there? And first understand the gap from a business perspective, from an affordability perspective, and then try to bring in the technology. And in 2011, we have the WHO report which talks about the 4 A's, okay, which is managing the mismatch in my healthcare systems. That's a wonderful report. And this 4 A's, what it says is the affordability, accessibility, availability, and appropriateness. Then for technical people like me, I think appropriateness is the most important thing. Put the technology later. First, find the gap and see, validate it with the clinical experts, and then you'd see what is the appropriate technology by which we can fix this gap. So this is something which is very, very important, and based on that, we could make product, and we have made this product, not only we put it in India, but now we are there in around 26 countries with our product. And what you do in India, I'm telling you, it becomes very relevant to the rest of the world.
Sure.
So this is a very, very interesting journey. At the same time, it is also quite painful because you need a lot of compromise here and lot of collaborative effort.
So I'm going to quickly go to the second round, and I'm going to ask each of you panelists to give your views on approach to health tech innovations. And I would like each one of you to spend a little bit time on how India is going to be ready for the rest of the world in the next coming years. And what is it that startup spaces can play a role here? Generally, when you look at a problem, I always say this, that when Newton saw the Apple, he saw the laws of gravity. When Steve Jobs saw it, he gave us a Mac system. Each one of us, that's what Ajit was talking to now. Each one of us looks at it in a different ways. Generally, we have seen overall in this space of healthcare innovations 2 approaches. One is, I have a problem, do you have a solution which you could solve this? So I approached Dr. Shyam Vasudeva and asked him, sir, you are a tech expert, can you help me with a solution? I have this technical clinical problem. To a second one where a geek comes and meets me and says, sir, I have a solution, this is a new technology I have, do you have anything relevant here that could help me fit your health problems? We have seen both these approaches and we've seen both of them work very well. I would want each one of you to give your share of experience in which kind of approach do you think is better, which one do you think, or is there a fusion third approach? I'm just wanted to get all of your views, and let's say, how did you all reach to this? I think, Soaib, if you can start off on this. Sure.
Just that I'm holding the mic. It's good. Yeah, see, what we see is that the only way we can actually bridge this gap is in a country like India. It's by bringing people together. And this is one of the fantastic ways. NASSCOM is doing a great job. And thanks to Narayanan and you for conducting this. So it's a wonderful opportunity. So what I have been personally trying to do is that setting up a small little sort of you can say a sandbox or an incubation center, sort of a mix of this in medical schools and technical schools. So I have already set up an incubator in one of the very well-known colleges here, one of the oldest engineering college, BMS. And then in JSS Medical College, we have set up another unit. And then in Andhra, Telangana, we have a SVS Medical where we have set up another sort of an incubation sandbox, you can say. And there, what we do is that, we don't simply start putting them together and do innovation. We want to find out how, we can stimulate this thought process and conduct some sort of challenging events, like hackathons and all these what we nowadays have. A similar sort of a thing, and get these doctors involved very closely with this. And this has actually helped us a lot, when we started 4 incubation facility centers as incubatees in BMS. One of them is also, Cyclops. It's a fantastic thing, we want the doctor and engineer to come together and not just, doctor is advising or something. They have to work together, they have equity, so that they are having their fullest participation in this. And the same in my own one, I have a company which I work with, Renolex. I had the concept of this making an indigenous dialysis machine and all that since 2007. But till 2012, I didn't start this because I did not get the right type of a technologist, a partner, a nephrologist. And only when I found my Dr. Vincent Lloyd, then I started along with him. And today, we already have a first of its kind indigenous dialysis machine. So that way, it's a little long stretch process. But what I mean to say is, it is not just the doctor and engineer, but the chemistries also should match. Sure. And the passion, most important is the passion. So that is something which, a sandbox sort of a arrangement can help.
Thank you for that. Please, sir. Yeah.
Okay, you want a startup view before you get the VC view?
No, I think...
okay. I would tend to agree with Dr. Shyam, particularly the approach which he spoke about, bringing doctors and engineers together. I don't see this as a one-off event where to either of your two hypotheses, I have a problem, do you have a solution? I have a solution, do you have a problem that fits? But it's more of a longer-term relationship that helps the engineer to understand what exactly is the problem, and over a period of time define the problem. As I said, problem definition is very critical, not only in terms of what diagnosis or treatment issues we are trying to solve, but what's the form that the solution will take. Very often the effectiveness of a medical technology depends not only on the technology itself, but how it is usable and how is it user-friendly, and those inputs come in from the physician. So this is a collaboration that happens over a period of time. The engineer has the ability in many ways to combine different technologies that are available off the shelf today. So when you talk of material sciences, you talk of life sciences and information technology, there's so many combinations that you can do with what's available off the shelf. And the engineer brings that skill. The doctor brings the knowledge of what the patients are going through, what are their challenges. We talked about affordability, access, appropriateness, and so on and so forth. And it's just this combination which will happen not in a one-off situation, but which will happen through more of a dialogue. And Stanford BioIndia, as an example, has this wonderful program. Some of you are here who are alumni of that program, where you actually work with doctors in All India Institute of Medical Sciences. You immerse yourself in that. You understand what are the issues, and thereby develop a solution.
So you do focus a lot on how the problem has been identified and how the solution has been evolved. If I'm right in putting it together?
Absolutely.
You focus a lot on the evolution of how the solution has come and how did the team evolve at identifying the problem together.
Yeah, because if you don't the starting point is the right problem identification, problem definition. If you don't do that proper, you develop a good product and it's of no use, at least in the near future.
And do you see a lot of startups doing the mistake when you reject some of these proposals? Do you see them reaching halfway and not having done the homework and already coming up with some kind of a midway solution?
Unfortunately so.
Okay. Ajit, your side.
Yeah. My view is that you always have to anchor with the right problem statement, right? I mean, you start with that, obviously. Now, the word problem may be obvious or it may be just non-obvious, right? Like, for instance, in some cases, it's very visible. In our case, the problem of lack of quality healthcare in the country is a very visible problem. It is there, right? Now, in another case, like for instance, you gave an example of Apple, whether you needed a new MP3 player was not an obvious problem, but he believed that the belief and the passion was that yes, it is a consumer problem. It is not the best way to deliver the solution. That is a problem, right? So a non-obvious problem is also a good place to start, right? Because you rethink and you get wonderful products out of it, right? And you suddenly wonder, what the hell were you doing with those little MP3 players before that? So both of us is essential. You could start in one of them. If you're passionate about a non-obvious problem, go for it, is what I would say. The second step is about imagining that solution. Now, this is where you need a mix of dreamers. You cannot think traditionally. If you have to really anchor your solution proposal from various points and see what you reached. And you could be wrong from where you anchored, so you might end up with a solution and you might want to rethink and reimagine. So reimagination is an essential piece of building that solution. You have to constantly keep doing it. If not, there is somebody who will come and disrupt you. We ourselves are scared. We just started, 1 year back. I'm pretty scared that next year, who is going to come and throw us off the thing, right? So we got to be constantly watchful of that. And then it is about, once you imagine, you need pragmatists in the execution, right? Sure. Who tell you, hey, stop dreaming, let's get this on the ground and execute, and you need to keep that cycle going repeatedly. I think this is the right way to build a solution, but I would always start with that problem statement. It could be my own, but...
that is what Milind was also alluding to, about the importance of the third wing, the person
Absolutely.
with the practical business plan.
Absolutely, yes. Right.
Yeah, sure.
I think that the other panelists pretty much covered most of it, but there are a few more things that I'd like to add. So I think it really doesn't matter which one of these two ways you think about innovation and which one of these two ways you think about problem solving. I think both will continue to exist, and there could be hybrids, as you said. But I think one thing, we've been talking about doctors and geeks, but I think that in India, a lot of solutions that we're going to see, at least my thought is a lot of solutions that we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years are going to be really grounds up solutions that are built for the Indian context and keeping the Indian context in mind. I think there's a lot that you can learn from other geographies, there's a lot you can learn from other countries, but a lot of it is going to be very, very grounds up, and that's a function of infrastructure being very unique over here, that's a function of healthcare regulation being very unique over here, and of course problems with access and whatnot. So what that means is that I think it's the problem solving is actually going to be quite more multi-stakeholder than just a geek and a doctor, right? Of course, you may have your business folks, but there are going to be situations, depending on what your business is, that perhaps the insurers also come into the picture when you're thinking about creating solutions. I think one thing that we haven't talked enough about is the patients themselves, and actually getting patients involved in the product development process, in the feedback process, as well as the solution creation process. And I think the last part is, very selfishly, I'm going to say this, my background's actually in product design. I haven't heard enough of that as well in this, that especially when we're talking about med tech, I think getting designers involved very early on in problem definition can actually be a real ace up your sleeve if you're a med tech company.
So would it be right for us to say that it's, rather than docs and geeks, it is health versus non-health partners? Because it could be a nurse, it could be a patient like whom you're saying, it could be anybody in the ecosystem of non-health, which could be finance, but the point we are all echoing together is that there are going to be multiple stakeholders, it's going to be cross-collaboration, and we need to identify the teams right at the beginning to make the core plan possible.
Oh, for sure, and I don't think this is something that is specific to or unique in healthcare, right? I think same thing happens in fintech, same things happens in edtech. You need a multidisciplinary team that is sort of anchored around some sort of, we talk about founder market fit a lot. I think these kind of spaces definitely require a lot more founder market fit than, say, an e-commerce company. But yeah, I tend to agree with you.
So can we at this point open it up to the audience for having, we have about 10 to 15 minutes more, so we can maybe open it up for questions and discussion if any of you have any questions. Okay, yeah. Can you have the mic in the first row, please?
Yeah, this is to Ajit. It's on EMR. Okay, so we see reluctance from doctor or hospitals to adopt EMR. So I have 2-3 questions. Number one, can an individual that's a patient can create their own EMR, and whether that can be accepted in a formal way or an informal way? Number one. Number two, EMR again, who is going to pay? Because currently, one, we talked about the doctor's time, and second is the technology, archiving, retrieving, and all that, right? So how do you see who is going to pay? Last and third question is, with Ayushman Bharat coming in, I was told that it is on a very robust technology platform. Is it driving the complete industry to follow some standards predominantly on the EMR? Because my EMR, if I carry, whether I create or somebody creates, everybody should see it, use it, and so on. Thanks.
Sure. So yeah, EMR is a hot topic. So, so one step back, any data collection process that you put in a workflow that is not natural to the users is bound to fail. EMR was always imagined as the end of something, right? I want EMRs. I want EMRs. And suddenly you could say, oh, I could now derive something out of it, therefore start creating EMRs. And you give it to the doctors and say, in your practice, start doing it. This is poor product design in my mind, and I'm sorry to be cutthroat about it. It's poor design. This is going to fail, right? But anywhere in the conversation between a doctor and patient, if you are able to seamlessly extract this, much like you do, for instance, when you are on your mobile looking at location or looking at traffic, you are contributing data, but at the same time consuming it. Now that's a seamless product design in my mind. One example. If you use those means of sourcing your data and creating it, then that could be probably a better way to approach it, right? I'm not saying that's the ideal way, but it could be a better way to do it. So we thought of the solution that way, right? Saying that, look, the conversations happen. How do we make sure that that conversation is seamlessly extracted and then the EMR constructed in that process? So therefore, it is we believe it is as much a job of the holder of the data. It is your data. So first of all, EMRs don't belong to the hospitals. I don't believe so. It is your data. So it is your health record. It is your medical record. So which means that you must also participate in creating it. During the conversations, there can be assistants and whatnot that you automated assistants, of course, to extract information, valuable information out of the conversation and create it. 3 doctors also have to do it. But the question is about how do you do that? Do you ask him to type during when he's doing things, or do you have better product designs to do that? I think it's a mix of all 3 that you need to do to get the right EMR product. Again, my point of view only. Once you have that, it can of course be validated by the medical practitioner to say, is this the right one? Can you add something more? So if you're only dealing with exceptions and only dealing with data creation for those exceptions, then I think it'll be a little bit more better accepted. So that's the way we went ahead and looked at it. Today, when our doctors look at a case, they look at the complete history and it comes automatically to them, right? It is all prepared and it comes to them. They look at it and say, I can take my decisions easily. So the clinical decision support now has become a reality. Our goal was not to create the EMR. EMR just became an eventuality that came because of the product design. To your second question about India specifically, right, and health, it's true that there is a lot of deep thinking that's going on in the industry to think of what is called as a health stack. Part of the Niti Ayog's working committee, etc., they're working on this thing called health stack, which basically, the full technology stack and what must providers and consumers of data do to that stack is being built. There is a strong data privacy, hopefully a bill pretty soon. The Sri Krishna committee report is yet to be tabled and built and so on and so forth, but talks about privacy of data and how you can consume the data and how you can extract value from it. So all this is coming through. None of it is on the ground yet. They are still in policy making and so on. But whatever I have seen, I believe that there is a good amount of strong thinking from the institution to think about AI, data, privacy, going very deep to the extent that, again, they say data belongs to you and you give your consent if a doctor or a institution or a diagnostic lab wants to see your data or share it with somebody and so on, right? Much like how you do UPI. UPI is where you give permission for a bank-to-bank transfer. It's where you give permission for your data to be accessed by somebody else and so on. So these frameworks do exist. None of them are implemented. So you can imagine that this will take years before it becomes mainstream. But I think the intent is right. And the belief that data is the new currency is there in the thinking, at least in the papers that I'm reading. That thinking is there in the machinery, right? That it will become a currency of the future, and therefore we need to rightly protect it and hold the fiduciaries like us who hold the data accountable for any breaches in it, right? So it talks about very hefty fines and
Ajit,
jail terms and so on.
Just one more point that I would want to add, that I'm talking on behalf of the Ministry of Health and on ICMR Ethics Board, which I sit on. This has been brought about multiple times. One of the fundamental flaws which he brought out to is the IT Act and the Drugs and Cosmetic Acts have not been working together. They have divergent views as of now and they don't know where to come together, and a lot of work is going on in this area to bring the fundamental acts, because it's a legal issue also. So I think I'll go to the next question, please. Yes.
My question is to Ajit. talking about having 20 doctors on your team for 25 engineers and stuff like that. So I'm very curious about how you, and he was talking about transferring from a waterfall model to an agile model of developing products. So I'm very curious about how you distribute your teams and what are the stakeholders like, and how do you develop products with multiple stakeholders together, and how do you resolve frictions? Because this is doctors and geeks thinking diagonally different when it comes to product design.
Yeah, I don't think we're diagonally different in terms of thinking, because that's the first thing that you got to get right. What you want to get done, I think, is the first thing that we all agree on. So, by the way, all of these doctors, I don't want you to get it wrong. So the doctors are part of our what we call as a care team, which is basically part of the care provisioning process. So when people come and consult on our platform, the first leg of the information gathering and the differential diagnosis, etc., is done by the MFINE system, and that's human and machine together, right? And that team that I talked about, 20 people, is part of that machinery who does that initial collection and so on. Now, when the machine becomes stronger and stronger, this will scale massively, right? And that's how I create the right amount of structured information, etc., for the actual doctors to come and look at it and make a judgment on what the problem is and give you the care, right? So they are doing care process every day. Now, in that process, we observe what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, right? So that's where we take inputs from how they're going about doing it, right? How do you deal with a gynecology case versus an orthopedic, right? What are the kind of questions you need to be asking? What are the things that you need to be investigating on? How do you approach the problem? What kind of images do you expect from the patients? And so on and so forth, right? That's where we observe. A few of them we take as lead product designers as well in the whole process, where we say, look, we have to get to the problem of a machine trying to figure out a path of execution. How do I triage and say, you come with this problem, do I ask you to just go to the emergency room because there is something very seriously wrong with you, don't waste your time on online consultation and so on, just go, right? How do you make that decision? How do you make that pathfinding process? This is something that where we jointly design. And we don't think in terms of long-term views. We are looking at, okay, what's the immediate problem, solve it, put out a product there, look at iteration, look at data, and then constantly doing feedback and then improving it on it, right? And many a times we throw away pieces as well. If it doesn't work, we say, yeah, it doesn't work, just move on. Next iteration and so on. So that's pretty much what we do. A lot more details go into the actual execution, but maybe outside we can talk about that.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Raghu Gulapalli. I'm from LV Prasad Eye Institute. Curious, from the standpoint of the two gentlemen on the right, given your long expertise in product development, as well from a medtech company, as well as from actually two medtech companies, what is the hardest thing to bring about from a behavioral change perspective on the clinicians, and what are the inhibitors for those changes?
See, it doesn't apply to all the clinicians, but most of the time what I have seen is that when a clinician is explaining the problem, or when they have jointly, we have seen a problem, the technologists are the ones, who come up with a solution, right? And then in this high-tech world, we have to patent it, okay? And at that time, there is always a sort of a conflict that, I have given you the problem, so I am the innovator, This sort of things, have been very much, nowadays I've seen, with, say, some of these cases where we work together. So, the task of identifying the problem, defining the problem, and will that be also considered as innovation? So this is something, which is fun. But the easiest way we solve it is that we also add the clinician on every publication and also on every patent, and that's one way of doing it. But generally, this doesn't happen when, it is a multinational company, or if it is already well-funded company, they would not be open to such a concept. So As long as we are a startup and we have so this is flexible, but maybe Milind can give a different perspective for that.
Yeah, I think just one other point that I would like to add is the ownership of the patient is with the clinician. So as far as a company is concerned, you may develop a very innovative product, but ultimately how it helps the patient, not only in terms of immediate clinical benefit, but the longevity of the benefit. How long does the benefit last and so on? How safe it is for the patient, down the road, are things that the clinician is very concerned with. And one of the challenges that many companies face is that they believe they have developed a very good product. They believe that they have taken inputs from the physician, and based on that they develop the product. But in the last mile, they haven't invested enough, and that last mile is about generating clinical data on safety and efficacy. And physicians today are so careful. If they don't have this data, they are not likely to accept the product. And that's one of the major differentiators between a multinational company and, let's say, a startup or an Indian organization. Resources are always at a crunch. And so particularly when you get to the last stage, you've not been able to get revenue from the product, and you've got to invest a lot more. Sometimes your clinical trial expenses can be more than the product development expenses. And in the absence of this, the clinician is not going to accept your product. So this is one of the major issues, can be sorted out if you plan properly, both in terms of how much time it will take, who are your stakeholders, and what kind of resources you're going to need.
Okay, I think that was the last question. So we'll wind up the session. Thank you very much, all the panelists, for this wonderful session. Thank you so much.